Hello and welcome to An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about Neverwhere, a BBC Two miniseries from 1996, and it's an urban fantasy series, or what we would today call urban fantasy. I don't know if the term was in much use 25 years ago, to be honest. Our main character is Richard Mayhew, a very ordinary fellow who stumbles into an extraordinary situation. This begins when he finds an injured woman in the street. She insists that she just needs rest, not a hospital, so he takes her back to his apartment. The next morning, two strange men turn up on Richard's doorstep. They show him a picture of the woman he's helping and claim that she's their sister Doreen. But Richard, despite not necessarily showing a lot of sense in other parts of his life, is smart enough not to fall for this less than subtle ruse. And thwarted, the two men leave, for now. The young woman, whose actual name is Dor, then sends Richard on an errand to fetch help. Through this experience, he learns of London Below, an entire parallel city beneath the one in which he has grown up. Unfortunately for Richard, by interacting with this other society, he comes under its spell and cannot return to his ordinary old life. You can live in London, or you can live in London Below. You can't live in both. He thus joins Dor on her quest to locate the person who had her family killed. As you might imagine, that's not really a very safe kind of thing to do. They have those two strange men on their trail, and their investigation seems to be leading them right toward the ominous and frightening beast of London. Neverwhere was written by Neil Gaiman, who is a pretty well-known author in what was apparently his first screenwriting credit. I've mostly enjoyed Gaiman's film and TV work, though he was also responsible for the 2007 Beowulf, which was not terribly good. As far as Neverwhere goes, I think there are many things to like about it, but it definitely has its flaws. And I enjoyed it more for its ideas and potential than for the actual product. So let's dive into the good and bad and why you might or might not want to spend your time in London Below. So, first of all, this is a mid-1990s BBC production, and it suffers from the usual flaw of mid-1990s BBC productions. It appears to have been made for spare change found down the back of the sofa. I don't know what the actual budget was, but it was very limited, and it has some unfortunate consequences for the show. For instance, the Beast of London, a fearsome, legendary creature of whom everyone speaks in hushed whispers and with wide, terrified eyes. Sounds terrifying, but what we actually get depicted on screen is a perfectly ordinary bull. Probably not actually even a bull, probably a castrated male cow. Because, they're safer. But look, I know a fully grown bull can weigh over a ton and is perfectly capable of inflicting hideous injuries or even death. But a mythical super monster, it is most palpably not. And the scene does not work terribly well. The low budget also led to an unfortunate decision. And that decision was to shoot on video and use a post-production process to give the footage a film look. This was seen as a more budget-conscious way to have it look like a high-end filmed production. Now, as a consequence of that decision, because on the surface, maybe that seemed like a reasonable choice, but one of the consequences of that decision was that they lit all of the scenes like they were being shot on film, which would have been fine if they had then gone through the post-production process. But the BBC decided not to pay for it. Now, the problem there is that film requires a much higher level of light than video, and without the post-production process, all of the footage looks way too bright and oversaturated. Allegedly, Neil Gaiman himself claimed that it was better to watch a low-quality bootleg of the show because the lower picture quality actually made it look better than the sort of overexposed original did. So, definitely some visual problems with the program. On the other hand, one of the things to like about Neverwhere is its setting. What we learn of London Below and its society is generally pretty interesting, and it's clear that Gaiman has given it a considerable amount of thought. It does sometimes come across as occasionally being a bit too self-consciously quirky, but it is filled with interesting and unusual characters. It may even be overfilled with them, both in terms of the narrative, sometimes being a little bit encumbered by the sheer volume of Mad Cat characters who need to be introduced and explained, but also in terms of the fact that casting all of the necessary actors will have cost money that might have been more productively, overall, been used on the visuals. In the final analysis, I think the world Gaiman created is an evocative and intriguing one. It's a shame that the show's technical shortcomings don't allow it to be seen to its best effect. Now, after Gaiman wrote Neverwhere as a script, he adapted that script into a novel, which was actually released during the time that the show was having its first television airing, September 1996. The book was a major international hit, much more popular than the TV series, and overall considered a much more successful presentation of the story. And I can certainly see why this would be the case. Gaiman had been writing comics and short stories, as well as co-writing the novel Good Omens with Terry Pratchett for a number of years before this. It was a storytelling form with which he had a lot more experience than he did with screenwriting. A textual presentation also has a number of other advantages. Firstly, because it plays to Gaiman's strengths of clever dialogue and eloquent narrative prose. Secondly, because it lets the imagination of the reader create the visuals of the scenes, rather than having to create the visual scenes with a highly restrictive budget, like they did for the TV show. And thirdly, it's much easier to properly include and pace all of the character interactions and quirky situations in a 460-page novel than it is in a 3-hour miniseries. As an idea, a general rule of thumb with screenwriting is a minute of screen time is a page of script. So 180 pages of script, generally speaking, for a 3-hour miniseries versus a 460-page novel. There's a lot more room for Gaiman to play in the novel. In the end, if urban fantasy is something you enjoy, I think Neverwhere is worth a look. It is, though, one case where I would recommend watching the screen version before you read the book, if you intend to do both. It's unlikely that the reality of the series will be able to live up to what your imagination conjures up from the novel, and so yeah, it is probably one of those relatively rare cases where I'm like, yeah, maybe watch the show before you try the novel. So that was Neverwhere. Next time, we go from a TV series that was adapted into a novel to the 2012 weblog adaptation of what may be one of the most filmed novels of all time, in Pride and Prejudice. It's the Emmy Award-winning YouTube series, The Lizzie Bennet Diaries. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.